This is an incredibly exciting time. And this is a graphic that shows so much experience, excitement, activity, progress. I hope you get a sense of that. If you sort of turn this on its head, you kind of see a funnel. And the statistics are that if you start back here with 5,000 or 10,000 products, you end up with one. And the really good news is we're through this stage. We're here now. We are a long way through this process. Doesn't mean that everything that you see there in phase 2 is going to work. You see that there's still a funnel going on. So as Mark said, it's not that everything we try is going to work, even though it all looks incredibly promising. But these are vital, vital stages to getting treatments for our guys. I'm going to talk a little bit about what everyone in this room can do to participate in this now. Because what's interesting about this is to get to where we are, we've done some amazing fundraising. We've done a lot of work to get people in that room together and to bring them together in conferences like this. But we're now at a stage where the people who are in the driver's seat are sitting in this room. And it's really important to realize that shift of what's going on here. So I'd like to, with Mark's incredibly wonderful introduction, I'd like to kind of make the rest of this a bit more of a discussion. So as I talk, please, if you have a comment or a question or a thought or whatever, please raise your hand and we'll make this an interactive thing from going forward. So what the heck is a clinical trial anyway? We keep using that term. There are a few important ingredients that you need to remember. Carefully designed. These things are never done casually. The bureaucratic nightmares to get to these stages are significant, and there's nothing that is not well thought through about these. It's the first time where we really use human volunteers. We've had this wonderful experience so far, and we're very lucky in Barth syndrome to have two, as Mark said, very important models to get us to this point so far. We have a mammal, a mouse, that has Barth syndrome. So we can test a lot of things on that mammal, that whole being, that has a lot in common with humans. But of course, it's still a mouse, so not everything translates. We also have human cells that Dr. Poo has put on the scaffold to actually make sort of a piece of heart tissue, not just a cell, but a piece of tissue. So we can also test all these things as we have on that piece of human tissue. So we move to the human arena, but of course it's not a whole human, it's only a little piece of tissue. But with those two things in the background, we're in really good shape to go forward. So now it's time to move over to actual human beings. And of course, the FDA gets involved because the two things they care most about in the world, which are the same things we care about, are safety and effectiveness. And that everything the FDA does are rooted in those two words. So how does the clinical trial work? Well, there are very strict guidelines about how it all works, about who can participate. Mark mentioned that in the UK trial, there are certain criteria, and they've signed up some people. And in the Emerita trial, we expect that they will be looking for kids over age 16. And then the guidelines also say very, very specifically what the trial entails. There's a whole team put together of nurses and doctors. They have you sign informed consents, which everyone in this room is now an expert in, right? Those lengthy papers that tell you what you might be up against and whether you're willing to participate. And then, I think very importantly, everybody who participates is examined very thoroughly in the beginning. They're given specific instructions for what they need to do, and they are monitored throughout the whole thing, and then, of course, evaluated again at the end. Informed consent, again, you guys, I really don't have to say anything about this. It talks about goals, procedures. Procedures, by the way, you'll hear this word protocol all the time. All it means is what the study really entails. It's the fancy word of saying what you have to do. It talks about potential risks and benefits, and this is where the first point of your interaction, please make sure you ask every question that comes to mind. There are no silly questions. There are no things that are off base. Ask everything and more of people who are conducting this trial before you sign anything. So protocol, the study plan, talks about who can participate, exactly what tests, procedures, MRIs, blood draw, whatever it is, medications, dosages, and of course how long this will go on. So how do you get results? How do you know if something's working? Well, that's a lot of what the FDA oversees. They try to make sure that the trial is going to go on for long enough that you can get results, long enough to really prove that it's safe, and then you have to have something to compare the results on whatever the new protocol is to compare against. In most trials, in cancer or lung disease, you have a whole group of people who take a medicine, and then a whole group of people who don't take the medicine, and they compare how those two groups are doing. In a rare disease, you almost never do it that way. We don't have enough people. So what we do, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I guess, down here, is what they do usually is called the crossover technique. And so every person in the study will get the treatment and will also get a pill or a shot or whatever it is that looks exactly the same but doesn't actually have the medicine in it. And what you will do is to be your own control. They will compare how you do taking the medicine and how you did not taking the medicine. So it's a terrific control because everything else about you is the same. They don't have to say, is this group really exactly the same as this group, and that kind of thing. So everybody in the trial will get the medicine, and that's a very important thing for you all to know. There is this concept called blinded. I'm sure you've heard of blinded studies. And what that means, if it's called single-blinded, then it means that the patient doesn't know if he's getting the medicine or if he's not getting the medicine. If it's double-blinded, it means the patient doesn't know and the doctor doesn't know, because they don't want anybody to be confused about whether a stomach ache actually has relevance or not. You know, if they know you're not on the medicine and you have a stomach ache, then guess what? It's not a side effect of the medicine, right? But if nobody knows that, then the data are much clearer. They write everything down, and it's just completely straightforward. So that's the concept of blinded. So in the crossover, for example, you will not know when you're taking the medicine and when you're not. Somebody, obviously, in the trial center knows. It's all done by code, and they will know that code 23B is on the medicine first and not later. And if there's ever a problem, they can look that up and help you. But it's much better if the doctors and the patients don't actually know exactly what stage you're in. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? Yes, Lynn? I believe so. I mean, one thing, as Mark said, we know these trials are coming. We haven't seen all the paperwork. It hasn't all been approved by the FDA yet. So this is guesses. This is how many rare disease trials work. I can't promise that every single trial we have will be like that, but that's the general approach in a rare disease. And one of the benefits of the crossover is that it requires many, many fewer participants. In many trials, of course, in cancer, they'd have 1,000 people taking a drug and 1,000 people not taking the drug. We don't have 1,000 people. So one of the things about crossover is, in a sense, you get twice the number of people because you have each person on and each person off. So it increases what they call the power of the data. That makes sense? So that's one reason it works in rare diseases. And the FDA understands our situation. They're not going to make us have 100 people do it. We don't have 100 people, right? Any other questions on that? Okay. So what are the potential benefits of participating in something like this? I think, as Elizabeth was saying, there's something really powerful about having an active role in your life. And I wouldn't discount that, actually. I think being in the game is really important for people. The other obvious thing is that you gain access to a new treatment before anybody else. That's kind of cool. and actually could be very important. You get really expert medical care. As I said, you're monitored in the beginning, you're monitored all the way throughout. In the case of what Mark was talking about with the Emerita, it's going to be Hillary Vernon at the KKI clinic that we all know, with all those doctors we all know, looking over you frequently. So that's important to know. You're going to be taken care of. And obviously, it's going to advance medical research and may help the participant or may just help the next generation of participants. But it really is contributing to science in a way that none of us has been able to do until this very moment. Amen. Yes?
So for the,
Oh, I'm sorry. Please wait for the mic so we can get it on tape. Thank you very much.
So for the trial with Hillary Vernon, if you're being monitored by her, what if you live in California? Do you have to keep going back to Hillary's clinic?
It's an excellent question, and each trial will work differently. So I can't speak for Hillary, and it isn't set up yet, so I don't know. I would guess that it's probably a little bit like Todd Cade's trials. Who in this room has been in Todd Cade's trials? Okay, a lot of you. All right, and the way that works is you go out, he's in St. Louis at Washington University. I believe he flew everybody out there for a first sort of initial session. And then he actually went to your home PT people and set it all up, and you did PT at home, and then you'd fly back later for him to evaluate you. That's the kind of thing I expect. It may be that Hillary needs to do certain things that only she can do, so maybe she'll have to fly you out more frequently. I don't know the answer to that. But that's the kind of question you need to ask when you're signing up.
Yeah, and in talking to Hillary a little bit, and I think it is something that they're still sorting out, but it's somewhat along the lines of what you just said, Kate. You'd come out for sort of a 3 or 4 or 5 day process at the beginning. I think she wants to keep people there for a few days at the beginning, just from a safety perspective, to make sure there's no immediate problems that she sees, also to do some baseline testing. Then you would go home, do a lot of the sort of blood draws and other things at your home hospital or doctor, and then she'd need to see you towards the end.
But each trial will be different, and you need to read the specifics of the paperwork carefully in each trial. I thought I saw another hand somewhere. Yes, Lynn?
As they're choosing the subject for the trial, I know one of our biggest challenges is getting enough.
Yes.
But as they look at those, are they looking for a cross-section? So are they looking purposely for different ages, different level of effectiveness, different geographies? Is that some of the criteria they look for when they're trying to put people in the study?
Again, I think every trial is different. Some trials necessarily have to exclude kids with transplants. Some trials necessarily have to exclude kids who have defibrillators because they have to do particular tests that you can't do. It's that kind of exclusion criteria. But I think in general, obviously they're trying to get data about the syndrome. So yes, I think they're looking generally for diversity in all those cases. A lot of the age criteria are because pills that have to be swallowed are large, and they don't think a 4-year-old can do it. It's that kind of reason. It's not that they're not interested in a 4-year-old. It's that what's required is going to be kind of tough. But yeah, I would think they'd want as much data as they could get within reasonable dimensions. Anybody else? Yes.
When they do the trials, if they have more than, they say 12, more than 12 boys that would be interested, or young men, sounds like it's going to be the men and not the boys, would they be able to change it, that they could have more available, or?
Well, we have an interesting balance here, because on the one hand, you're right, more people in a trial give more data. On the other hand, we are in an incredibly fortunate situation of having multiple trials. And if we have too many people in one trial, one of the exclusion criteria may be that you couldn't have tried any new medication for, say, 2 years. I'm making that up. So we need to be careful. I mean, if the number is 12, that means that the FDA and all the statisticians in the world have decided that 12 is enough to make this decision. So they probably won't take more than 12. and they probably shouldn't take more than 12. We'll all get the benefit of those 12. And then if I go back to this slide, I said we're probably in this phase 2 business. You'll see there are other phases beyond. And what might happen is that they do a follow-on study that might include more people. Maybe they'll choose a specific dose. Well, they would have chosen a specific dose even in phase 2, but they may adjust something on the basis of what they've learned in phase 2. And they may do another trial with even more people. Or in rare diseases, the other thing that happens is you can be kind of clever and mush 2 and 3 together. And so we can just go right to approval if things really look promising. One thing, just now that I'm on this slide, that I found sort of interesting. The statistics over all diseases, all trials, are that from phase 1 forward, the approval rating of getting from here, from a phase 1 trial, to an actual drug that's approved is 10%. Only 1 in 10 trials at phase 1. But this is the first time a human being's ever tried it. So if we're starting in this phase, the statistics from here are 40%. So almost 1 in 2, or 1 in 3. So if we have 3 or 4 trials going on, can't guarantee that anything's going to work, but it's looking good. Something is going to help our kids. It may be more of a Band-Aid, not a real solution, but it's going to be improvement. Yes, Steve?
One of the questions that is that all of our kids seem to have slightly different manifestations of Barth syndrome. They all, they're all a little different. So I'm wondering what experience or what knowledge we have about if it works for some, is it going to work for all? Could it only work for some special portion of our kids? How does that, what kind of results might we see?
It's an excellent question that everybody is thinking about. And of course, that's true in cancer, that's true, and it's true for the common cold. It's true for a headache. Some people like Tylenol, some people like Advil, So when the statisticians are thinking about how to construct the trials, they choose a number knowing the diversity of what we have in our mix. And if everybody who's in the trial benefits, that's a pretty good omen. If 10 of the 12, using 12 as an example, benefit, that's still a really good omen. If only 2 do, then it doesn't mean it doesn't work, but it means they have to refine and find out what the heck about those 2 people was so beneficial. So this is a starting point. It's not the ending point. And I think they'll refine that kind of thing as they go along. Because it's true. They are all different. But one of the things I know a lot of you guys and your kids did was the 6-minute walk test. That is a brilliant, it's called an endpoint. That's what they evaluate at the end. Because it's so easy to do. It doesn't require blood. You can do it in Cincinnati. You can do it in Gainesville. You can do it anywhere. And some of the trials, and the thing about our guys is there's great debate scientifically about is there fatigue, is there lack of get up and go, if you will, because of their heart problems or because of their muscle problems or because of both. We don't care if they can walk twice as far in 6 minutes on this medicine. Who the heck cares what the mechanism is, right? I mean, there are reasons that we've chosen these things for trials. There's a reason that we think the mechanism works. I'm not saying we don't care about the mechanism. But to pinpoint it and to figure out that it works for you but not for you, if it helps everybody, who the heck cares that you have a different gene mutation? Yes?
I just wanted to ask, when we do the trials, or the boys do the trial,
Yes.
how rigid do we think the taking of the medication is going to be?
Extremely rigid. The closer you follow exactly what they ask you to do, the better. Because that's the only way we can really get good information. That's a really good point. This is not a time when, if Dr. Kelly says, oh, please take 2 grams of arginine, and some days you remember and some days you don't. A trial is not like that. If they say take it at 9 a.m., they mean take it at 9 a.m. and not 9:30 a.m. because that's the only way we can really tell what's going on. So when I said before in another slide strict guidelines, I meant strict guidelines. And that's one of the criteria. That's one reason the little kids aren't included, is they're not sure that people can keep up with what's necessary. And that may be an exclusion criteria for, young people who are just now living on their own, and they forget to eat sometimes, and if they're gonna forget to take the medicine, they're not gonna be involved in the trial. And they shouldn't be, because the data won't be accurate. Yes, Fraser.
Yeah. Back otherwise.
Kate, just based on the previous question regarding simply house calls, nobody's really going to probably want to jump on a jet and do 14 hours to Brisbane to check it. So just a question based on historical trials of things. Would you expect a time frame of a month for a total trial of something that whereby far easier for me to come over here and sit on the beach and enjoy it while the camera's in there, and, for a month, than to subject someone to a 14-hour flight?
Sure. It's an excellent question, and I'm not trying to beg the answer, but honestly, it depends on the trial. I mean, we just heard Mark say that in general mitochondrial patients, this Emerita showed results in 5 days. That's astounding. And that's not usual. Don't count on that. Don't count that you're going to take 2 doses of something and everybody will be great. It doesn't work that way. But maybe it does in this one. So with that history, perhaps when they're designing this test, it would be shorter. Generally, tests tend to be long because they want to see how you do over a long period of time. Maybe this could be shorter. Every test will be different. Every trial will be different. But you should know that everybody doing these wants them to succeed and wants to get to approval fast. I mean, everybody wants to be here. Whoops, pushing way too many buttons. Everybody wants to be there. We all have the same goals. We all want safety. We don't want to speed it up so fast that we're not doing it right. We want safety, we want to know it's effective, and we're dying to get to approval. Because once it's approved, then everybody can take it, whether you're 4 or 26 or no matter where you live. Don't actually know what your approval laws in Australia are.
Kate, if I could just add something.
Please.
I've been talking to the stealth people about this potential trial that's coming, and I think they'd want to hear from us in terms of what we think we can do, and when we have 12 people stepping up to the plate, what is going to work for them. I think what they're thinking right now is, although this 5-day trial did work wonderfully for UMDF, I think they're thinking more in terms of a more substantial trial, sort of combining phases 2 and 3
Right.
together, because they're worried that with a 5-day trial, you only get so much information. They would necessarily have to do subsequent longer trials, and I think the hope is to try to do it all in one. Again, what's currently on the drawing board is a 6-month trial where I think you'd be on drug for 2 months, on placebo for 2 months, and then washout for 2 months. And
In between, yep.
Yeah. And so I think that's the current plan. But I think they want to hear from us as to what we think is doable. And so, I'd love to have conversations with people about that, because they will listen to us and try to construct something that's workable for us.
That's one detail I've failed to mention in the crossover piece. There's always what's called this washout period between when you take the drug or the placebo, because you don't know which it is, and when you take the drug or placebo and you don't know which it is, because you have to, it's like a palate cleanser. You have to let things get out of your body before they can really evaluate the second piece. So that makes the trial a little bit longer because you have to have this interim period. But honestly, 2 months in the scheme of things is not a long trial to be on or to be off. And it probably has to be that long to get our guys, if they have 28-day neutropenic cycles, we want to get the whole 28 days. If they've had a cold or if they're in school taking tests, they want to see them under stress and not under stress. I mean, it's important to have enough data to really get a sense of what's going on. But I know they will also make it as short as they think is reasonable. So we'll see. We'd love to have you come for 6 months.
And it's never really that big a deal to fly over, to spend a decent time, then go back to reality You know, it's the sort of thing that I guess we all look at it and we all go, look, we're all really keen to want to jump on the wagon and do it. It's a little scary, but it's rather exciting as well.
Exactly.
So you want to do it, and you just do it. You know, it's the sort of thing that, as Don and I, we've had discussed it before. We said, we want to jump on the wagon, don't just do it and go back. When you have to.
That's the right attitude, Fraser. That's perfect.
You can stay with the man.
Yeah. So let's get to that. Fraser brings up a very important point, and it is my next slide. So we were talking about the benefits. Obviously, in any trial, this is not something that's known, which is why it's called a trial. There are potential risks. So what are they? Well, I actually don't think this first one is really a risk. It's that it may not be effective. I mean, you may go through all this, I guess is the reason it's a risk, and it might not work. We said that 40% from phase 2 on work. That means 60% don't work. We're all going to face some of this. And if we had a crystal ball, we'd know which the 40 was and which the 60% was, but we don't. So it might not be effective. And it might not be effective, as Lynn was saying, for anybody, or maybe just for a particular individual. So those are risks. These protocols are not completely nothing. And they are going to require more time, attention, discomfort, maybe funds for things like travel, procedures, hospital stays, right? And obviously, there's this thing called side effects that are possible. They can be trivial, or they could be potentially significant. There are also side effects to doing nothing, right? And there are side effects to every single thing that we put in our guys' mouths. So it's not like this is new. We deal with side effects every time we start a new medication, every time we discontinue a medication. So this is a world in which we live, but I think it's only fair, because we want to be completely open here, that side effects are a possibility. Yes?
Kate, I had a question.
Oh, can we turn the mic on, please?
This go on?
Oh. Try it now.
Hello? Okay.
There, Kevin.
My question had to do more with some of the folks in the room that may have younger children than 16.
Yes.
Are you able to speak to any examples of clinical trials in the past that have been successful with boys that were older or men that were older, and how long the process took to trickle down to being able, like, would that drug be able to be used by younger children as well? If you're not, that's fine. I just didn't know, how long does that process generally take? Because we wouldn't be able to participate with younger children.
In rare diseases, it takes a lot shorter than in non-rare diseases. There's something called fast tracking, because the FDA is very aware of all this. Pediatrics is tricky, and the FDA is careful with pediatrics, and I'm grateful for that. But I think if something works a slam dunk, they are going to be very eager to get everybody on it as soon as they can, or it be available to everyone. The exact timing, we don't know. I mean, we were talking about a 6-month trial. What happens at the end of that 6 months is that then all those data go back to whoever's doing the trial, who does the analysis, even if we all think it's great. There has to be formal analysis, obviously, and it has to be written up. And then all that goes back to the FDA, and the FDA has to whir and buzz, and that's where the fast track part comes. And that can take easily 6 months, maybe a year, before they get back and say, okay, this is now an official drug.
Would the older boys be subjected to that wait time too, or just the younger ones?
Well, and it's not just the older boys, it's the people not on the trial.
Sure.
What usually happens, and we have to make sure that this is how the trials are set up, but if the results look really promising, then usually the people in the trial are allowed to continue to take it, even before it's approved. What happens is the people who are not in the trial are not allowed to take it until it's approved. It's a little trickier than that, but that's essentially how it works. Ron?
Hi, Kate. Just to add a little background from our disease, Friedreich's ataxia, we've been through all the phases, and what we found in answer to your question is, as Kate said, and Mark indicated too, the FDA is very much concerned about pediatrics, and they don't want a trial to be conducted first on pediatrics if it has no safety profile in pediatrics. So they quite often will have you start with 16 and older, 18 and older, start with your older patients, and in the same trial, if over a 6-month period, for example, it's shown to be safe in those 16-year-olds, they say, okay, now we'll try a small cohort of younger kids. So they will actually let you do that in the same trial, and that should be part of your protocol design to when you go to the FDA to begin with. We'd like to begin with the older patients, but if the safety profile is established early, go to the younger patients. Another way they're flexible, as Kate said, they're quite often more flexible with rare disease than common disease, is if you are trialing a repurposed drug that already has a safety profile in pediatrics. We're doing a phase 3 right now in a repurposed drug already approved in 2 other pediatric conditions. So of course they let us go to pediatrics right away. So if you're working with a repurposed drug, or if you're working with a drug that doesn't have a safety profile in kids, they might cause you to start with older kids and then go to younger kids in the same trials.
Thank you, Ron. That's very helpful. Those are some of the details I hadn't gotten to yet. Anybody else? Lynn, okay.
So I guess a follow-on question to that, in the bezafibrate trial, since that one is already approved and we must know the protocol to some extent, is that drug already approved for use in pediatrics, and do we have that secondary clause that says we can move to pediatrics if it looks really good?
Do you know, I think I know the answer, but I believe that the drug has been in use in adults in Europe for 40 years. And in fact, importantly, it's been in use in adults with cardiovascular disease for 40 years. I don't think that it's in pediatrics yet. So I haven't actually seen the protocol. I don't know if this first phase includes younger kids. I'm hoping it does, and if not, I'm hoping it will soon. But we have that very much in mind and Mick may be able to answer our question because she's right back there.
Yes, the bezafibrate trial will include the younger children right from the beginning. Children over the age of 6.
Great. So that 6 cutoff, I'm guessing, Mick, is for practical reasons about taking the medication. Absolutely. Yeah. That was part of the pill swallowing clinic we had. We're trying to get everybody ready for what's coming.
Oh, Steve, I'm going to give this to you. I wanted, Donna, we had a meeting with Matt a few months ago, and there were some observations that were some questions that the Australians had, and I know that they're particularly interested, some of those that are not here. And after Steve's finished, I just wanted to pass this up to Donna, that's all.
Okay.
So I'm going to give Donna 5 seconds to figure out what it is she's going to say. Kate, one of the things that I think people are going to want to know about is what communication will come back, first to the people who are in the trial, and secondly to the rest of us here, either while the trial is going on or how soon after. It seems I remember that Fast Track with the FDA moves you from 10 months to 6 months. So, even if we were on Fast Track,
analysis of the data.
Of the analysis by the FDA and approval. So you may be talking, at least my understanding is 6 months after the last endpoint in the trial. But do you have any idea what kind of communication will go on to BSF, to the families, to anybody else about the results of the trial, good, bad, or indifferent, and how that would work?
During that 6-month time, 0. They do their thing. At the end of it, they will issue their report and issue now, the pharmaceutical may have communication, but to the patients, it will not be anything.
Is a paper typically written at some point, or?
Sometimes that adds more time. Yeah. So, it's nice to get it in writing so that somebody who's whose doctor maybe isn't familiar with everything can find something in writing.
So one of the things to expect then is if you're in the trial, or even if you know the trial's going on, the trial itself could last 6 months. There could be another 10 months before anything is even publicly available. It could be a long time, feeling like a long time, before anybody has a clue whether it was successful or not, or anything can happen. And now, Donna.
Thanks, Shelley. The drug bezafibrate is actually approved for use in Australia, so is it not something that could be extended out for the Australian families as well, or are you just going to keep it centred in the UK to start with?
Mick, I think I can answer that, but I think the answer is that it will be centered in Bristol for now. But my guess is the fact that it's approved in Australia means that when results are good in the UK, you can just go get it the next day. In the US, bezafibrate is not approved, which is why we're not doing the trial in the US. We are hoping very much that when Mick and Colin and their team get fabulous results, that the FDA will then say, gee, this looks interesting, and maybe speed it through a little bit in the US. But that's exactly why we're doing the trial in the UK. There are so many nuances and details involved in these you can't even imagine.
Right. One more thing, Kate, that I would
Yes.
add is, if a trial in the UK goes forward and it's successful, and Dr. Stewart is able to publish a paper with these successful results, I don't know anything about the laws in Australia, but there is something known as compassionate use exception. So for even a drug that's not approved for treatment, there's this compassionate use exception that if it's sort of been shown in a published study or publication that it works, you can kind of get an exception to have a doctor individually prescribe it without it necessarily being an approved therapy in the US or Australia. And so that's another pathway towards potentially getting a treatment out to boys, particularly if they're in, serious dire straits.
Exactly.
This compassionate use exception, via publication of results before FDA approval is one way to get there.
Yes, Sheila.
So even though they're doing the study initially in the UK, this is probably a stupid question, but so we can't take our boys from America to them and participate in the study? Do you have to be a citizen? How does that work?
I think they probably have enough guys in Bristol, and I think we probably have to wait, but I'll let Mick answer. Part of the problem is that you couldn't get it back in the States.
I'm just thinking maybe we need to pull Colin in from
I
next
know.
door and let him come and have a chat to us. I think the problem at the moment is that you have to undergo the testing, you've got to get all your baseline data, you've got to start the medication, then you've got to go back again. Guys who've had transplants will need extra blood tests and extra surveillance. So it just becomes really difficult to include patients from other countries because of the whole compliance issues, and just really difficult for many of our families to travel that far. So it might make sense in a way if we've got enough patients in one area with one trial to use them and get other patients in other areas, trying different things, and then we can learn from both of those. It's kind of like double the benefit for us, I think.
I think that's a really important point, Mick. What we don't want is that everyone in the room runs to the first trial and then no one signs up for the second trial. Because it may be that the second trial is the one that's the home run. We need to spread ourselves out and do all of these things. So I understand your eagerness. We're all eager, but we're going to have to wait for the right one to be involved in. And as I was saying, part of the problem is even if it worked brilliantly, it's not approved in the United States, so you can't get it here. So. Exactly. And the problem with compassionate use is you have to be in really bad shape to qualify.
I think Matt Toth's and our hope is that we can use a successful trial in the UK to sort of springboard to getting approval in the US.
Very
and not
much.
have to sort of redo what they do there. But yeah, as Kate says, bezafibrate is not an approved drug for any condition in the U.S.
Correct.
So that's one,
There's no
challenge.
manufacturer here, that's a problem. But, yes, Ron?
Our experience has been we've spent a lot of time working with the Food and Drug Administration here and with the European Medicine Agency in Europe, which is the FDA equivalent for all of the European Union. And they've spent a lot of their time working together. They're trying to harmonize, is the campaign, harmonize the two agencies in these approvals. And as Mark has just said, we've heard from the key reviewers at the FDA and the key reviewers at the EMA that good clinical data is good clinical data, no matter where it comes from. If you convince us at the FDA that your trial in Europe was done under the proper conditions with the same requirements as our FDA-approved trials, we will consider those data just as valuable as if they were done at Harvard or Yale. So, and the EMA feels the same way. So, what we've been encouraged to do is to keep the other agency involved from the beginning. So inform the EMA that you're doing an FDA study in your disease that has European patients. Inform the FDA that you're doing a European study on patients that you also have in the US. So they know, and you keep them informed as you go along so that they're not blindsided at the end, and you expect to do get them to do the same 6-month review the FDA is going to do, and so I would just encourage you to keep both sides of the Atlantic and the Pacific involved. So.
Very good
the
point.
Australians have their own agency. So.
Yeah, and in fact, we first went to the FDA with bezafibrate, and there were so many roadblocks put up because, as people have said, it's not approved in this country for any use in any individual. We had to start way back here with that. And so we said, well, heck, we can go to Bristol where we have the patients and it is approved. So let's start, and if we find we get all the way through here, then FDA is not going to make us probably go back to that stage in this country. So that's what we're hoping. I just wanted to put this slide up. I didn't put these numbers on it because they aren't terribly relevant for rare diseases, because as we're saying, rare disease process speeds up. But just to give you a sense of this, in drug discovery overall, these stages usually take 3 to 6 years. These stages 6 to 7 years, and these stages at least 2. So it's nice that we're kind of on the right side of this equation already. Yes,
Kate,
Steve?
2 quick points. One is Matt and I actually had a conversation with the FDA about bezafibrate and the trial in the UK to see, A, to tell them that we were doing it, and B, to say, okay, if we get the right results and good results, will you accept them? And just one indication, they had 20 people on that phone call.
Yeah.
Matt and I were a little taken aback.
Yeah.
But the 20 people from the FDA who were very interested, A, in Barth syndrome, B, in bezafibrates, and rare disorders. So they're aware and interested, and that was terrific. So hopefully, if we get good results in the UK, then the results will be accelerated to the FDA in the States as well. But let me ask you another question, Kate, and it's impossible to answer directly, but how do we... One of the questions that everybody is going to ask of the people who invite them to be part of their trials is, tell me about side effects. What kind of side effects might I see? What kinds of things do I have to worry about? How are you going to help me make sure that the side effects don't have a big effect on my child? I would rather have my child not be an experiment, but all things considered, I need the experiment done, and so there's only a couple of us, we have to step up. How should we talk to these people about side effects, particularly when, with all the drugs kids are taking today, if you actually read those long white papers that come with the drugs, and half of it is about a list of all these horrible side effects, how should we think about side effects, and how do you even have that conversation with these people?
Well, and any time you watch television, of course, and you see a drug commercial, half of it is the commercial, and the other half is someone speaking as fast as this because they're going through all, they're going through the god-long list of things that might go wrong. They have to do that by law. You're right, that happens. I mean, what's the side effect of eating chili? There are side effects of a lot of things we do in life. So I want to get to how do we ask questions, because I think that's really an important thing. And before I get to that, I want to say it's all in the consent process. When you sit down and talk, and it should not be like this, right? You're not under a hot light being told you have to sign. This is your chance to really ask, so take advantage of it. So what kind of questions might you ask? A lot of these I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because you guys are experts in informed consent. But obviously you need to read the form carefully, figure out what it says, find out who approved the study, just for your own sense of peace, right? Is it a fly-by-night group? Is it Johns Hopkins, right? It gives you a little sense of safety and stuff if Johns Hopkins IRB has looked at this and said, we think this is a good study, okay? Ask them why they think this is a good idea. What do you think this is going to do? Right? Why is this promising? Why should I subject myself or my child to this? What exactly does it entail, so you know exactly what you're up against, because you do have to follow it precisely, whatever it is. How long, what do I have to do and for how long? Who's in charge? If I have a question or I don't feel well one day, what do I do? Who do I call? What health care can I expect? What if I do get sick? What do I do? Who pays for it? Are you involved? I live in, Cleveland and you're in Johns Hopkins. What do I do if I get sick? Talk about all that. Don't just say it's assumed to work out. They have a plan, but you should know what that plan is before you sign on the dotted line. What should I especially watch out for during this trial? What do you think ahead of time some of the side effects might be? I think this is a really important question. Do you think the kids might get nauseated? Do you think they might get tired? Are you worried about arrhythmia? I mean, not that I want to focus on it and kind of, look, oh, maybe they're sick today. But just get a little heads up on the kinds of things you should be aware of so that you don't ignore something that might be important. Okay? How will costs be handled? This is a really important one. I think a lot of the trials we're talking about, they will cover all the costs. That may not be true in all trials. Always ask that question. And some of the things included in trials probably are a matter of standard of care, and probably your insurance will cover it. So my guess is it's likely to be kind of a hybrid of who covers the costs. But find out about all that, and in your particular case with your particular insurance situation, find out how it works. What hope for result? Are we hoping the guys won't have arrhythmias anymore? Are we hoping they'll be able to walk the 6-minute walk test more? Are they going to grow? Are they going to get hungry? I mean, what are you looking for? Obviously, what are the potential risks? And that's when this long blah, 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 will come out. But think about what they're saying, and if some of them are tired, headache, nausea, we're kind of used to those. If it's sudden death on the playground, pay attention. And frankly, if it's one of those as a side effect, you're not going to see the trial because that won't be allowed, right? But look at what they are. What are the potential alternative treatments? Everybody in this room is pretty up to speed on alternative treatments because you're here and you're in the loop. So this is particularly for people that aren't as associated with our group. But if I didn't do this, what are my other choices? Right? That's a good question. And anything else that comes to mind, literally. Can I still eat pickles when I'm doing this trial? Because I really need to eat pickles. Ask it, because maybe you can't, right? Can I still play, whatever it is, whatever you're thinking about, ask it. Think about it ahead of time so you go in with questions. But then as they talk to you about the trial, more will come to mind. Jot them down and ask them. Yes, Lynn?
Will they share with you things like, I want to say disqualification criteria? So what happens when somebody gets really sick or has a personal crisis of some sort that means that they're no longer appropriate in the trial? Will they share with that up front, here's how bad it has to be before we'll pull you out? And do they make sure they have enough people in the trial that if some of them have to pull out for some reason, their results are still considered strong enough to go forward?
They should consider all that, but again, ask it. Ask it. Because that's a two-sided coin, too. They can say, you know, you're too sick, we can't go forward. The other thing you need to know is that all clinical trials are voluntary. And at any time, for any reason, if you don't want to do it anymore, you don't have to do it anymore. So it may, you know, you may have to wind down on a treatment. Maybe you can't just go cold turkey or whatever it is. But you always have the choice of saying, I've had enough, for whatever reason. Yes, Sheila.
You sort of answered my question, but part of what I was going to say was I sort of feel afraid for my son not to take part in the trial because I'm worried that if he doesn't, will we have enough people to do things, and then what happens to the next generation, and because he's only 10, what happens to him? So in a way I sort of force him to participate because I'm afraid of what we won't discover if we all don't play a part.
That is such an important comment. So let's get down to brass tacks here. There are 200 kids in the world that we know of living. Every trial is going to take, well, different numbers, but you can't expect when you look left and you look right that it's going to be the other people who do this. It has to be us, right? Now, you choose which trial you want to be in, and because your son's 10, there's some he won't be able to be in, and, you know, depending on where you live, you can't be in some. But please, I implore you to consider participating. We can't make you, we won't make you try a particular trial, but I implore you to consider participating. Because, you know, the statistics are, and I have a slide here somewhere on this, 80% of trials fail to meet their milestones because people don't participate. It's astonishing. 80%. So that may be that by the end they don't have enough people for their data to be really powerful. It may be that they had to delay 9 months because it took them so long to get people to sign up. It doesn't mean that 80% don't work, but 80% had trouble. And if you don't think that raises the costs as well, and costs because it takes longer for us to get treatments. So it's a...
Community would never get another chance at that drug.
That's right. Never get another chance at that drug. And that... right, that pharmaceutical's never coming back to you. One of the reasons, I think we have to be clear about this, one of the reasons we have 4 or 5 or 6 possibilities here is because this group is strong and we have access to you guys. Usually when there are 200 people in the world and someone wants to try something, they say, I have no idea how to find a single person. You know, one lives in California and one lives in... I can't do this, even though I'm intrigued and I think I have a good product. Because of this group, we have communication with people and can get the word out. We will never force you, and we will not let the pharmaceuticals have direct access to you. But they can tell us, and we can post something that say this is a possibility. And then it's up to you guys, because it is all volunteer, to follow up with the people directly. But that's the punchline of this whole morning, is this is really exciting. Science will stop right now. I mean, literally stop, unless people here go forward. It's incredible power. I mean, you think we're just laymen, what are we? But this is where the power is right now. We can help our kids and we can save lives, literally, in this room. Sheila.
I've got 2 questions. My first question is, so once we agree, which Ben's 19 now, he'll have to agree to do this on his own.
Correct.
But once he does that and signs off, is that a contract between him and the clinical trial, or would his cardiologist at home need to be involved and have communication with the trial? How does that work? That's my first question.
Okay, let me try to answer that one first.
Okay.
I would always tell your doctor about what you're considering and see if the doctor has any input. They might encourage you. They might say, oh man, that's a lot of work, really? But tell them why you're interested. Tell them about this session. Tell them about the options. But because they're likely to be involved if your kid gets a cold, which may or may not have anything to do with the trial, but if your child goes in on different medications than your doctor knows he was taking, that's not really a cool thing. Communication is always a good thing. Depending on the trial, they may or may not be actually a little bit involved in terms of taking blood and that kind of thing. It depends how the trials work. But I think communication is always a positive. But don't let them also say, it's a lot of work, come on, let somebody else do it. Because we in this room understand that we can't do that. So push back if you get that reaction. Because it may be a little paperwork for the doctor. No doctor likes extra paperwork. If they really care about your kid, they should be psyched that there's something new to try.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, I know most of these clinical trials are all surrounded around our boys and young men. But my question is, I know and this is probably another stupid question, but we've got carriers in the room. So could potentially the gene therapy, is that a consideration that gene therapy could also be given to our carriers to correct their gene? Is that being considered? Are they being included in the trial? Could they be included in the trial? Because we have our carrier girls that we still have got to look out for. Because especially some of ours that are fixing to be childbearing years, that's a huge question.
I hear you.
For our carriers.
I know.
If you wanted to answer it,
Go ahead.
would say certainly we have focus on that. We know that is something that we want to address too down the road. I would say that it's a more complicated form of gene therapy that I think would be required to address a carrier issue as opposed to what the boys and young men are dealing with. And so I think that's probably further off down the road as something that might be something we could do, but it's certainly something we have our eyes on and would like to take advantage of if the technology moves far enough along to make that possible.
I would say the same. I think an analogy actually is that our boys can be tested for the gene at any age. Our girls, they really don't test until 18 because there's no active issue. Unfortunately, I think carrier issues are often relegated to, non-active. If they're in childbearing age, it's different. But my guess is that in that funnel, that would be more toward the end. I think they're going to start with boys, and then if something works, they may very well be interested in broadening that, just as broadening to the younger age groups we were talking about. But I hear you. We're in the same situation.
Okay, do we have any idea yet? I guess it's too early for most of the trials, except maybe the bezafibrate. Do we know that if any of the current medications they're taking, or in particular the amino acids, would any of those have to be stopped prior to a trial?
We don't know that. It's something we're very interested in finding out, and that is absolutely a specific question. One of the things I would do going into these informed consent meetings is I would take a list of my kids' prescriptions or medications of any kind and say, you should know that this is what he is taking. Is any of this relevant? Or, do we need to stop or consider stopping any of these? That's a really good specific question to go in with.
And I was just going to add for the Emerita trial that Stealth is talking about, I asked that specific question to them, and they said that you could keep on everything you're taking, including the amino acids. And so I think it's going to be an open question for each trial that comes along, but certainly for that one, it's okay. Mick, you can probably answer the question for the bezafibrate trial.
He did that on purpose. Did you see that? Okay, Greg Holly has to ask the next question, or somebody right at the top. For the bezafibrate trial, we do know that boys who have been transplanted will need to come off their statins because bezafibrate works in a similar way. But that's all been checked out, and that seems to be fine. So again, I think every trial is a little bit different, and you need to ask the question. And it's a kind of risk versus benefit scenario all the time. You know, if you can think about, I'm going to stop this, but this drug will be doing, you know, something similar. So while I don't have the exact answer about the amino acids, because very few of the boys in the UK are on amino acids, so that's not really an issue. For instance, though, Nick is going to take part in Todd Cade's study, and he's going to stop his amino acids, but just for a few days before he does the trial, which doesn't concern me in the slightest. So.
Right. So that's a good point, Mick. If they do say, yes, you have to stop something, it may not be a bad thing. It may be that they're coming up with sort of a replacement that might even work better. So just think about that all. And every trial will be different. So don't think if you've had these conversations with one trial that you shouldn't go in with the same list of questions the next time around, and more. Anybody else?
I just wanted to share with you
Yes.
one of the problems that we had in the UK is that, for instance, one of our families did approach their local doctors about, you know, saying, you know, I'm thinking about starting this trial. And the doctor said, oh no, you can't start anything, without discussing it with the family, without discussing it with the people who are running the trial. So I would just encourage everybody to really, you know a little bit about what you want to, you want to say, and to make sure that, you know, your local doctors are actually in touch with the right people so that they can get that information too. Because we're talking about us getting the information, but sometimes the stumbling block is just because your doctors, who you know and have looked after your kids for a long time, just say to you, oh really, why would you want to rock the boat? That's quite hard, yeah. The other thing that I was wondering about, is there's a question from me, is we have the problem that we don't have very many kids who are going to be involved, kids and young people who would be involved in a trial. Then we have the problem that some of them who do enroll might have to fall out because of illness or circumstance. And then we have the other problem that you've got to start in your 16-plus population, and that's a population that often have problems with remembering to take their medications and taking it on time. Do we know of any smartphone technologies or any kind of technologies that can help with compliance and help our young adults to take the medication that they have to take regularly?
Other than mothers?
Well, yeah, that's it. This is exactly our problem, Amy.
It's an excellent question, Mick, and I've wondered the same thing. I've heard of some things. I don't have any particularly in mind, and I'm going to ask Ron in a minute if he knows of any, but Amy?
There are apps for pill reminders. The person to speak with is Bree, because I was with her the other day and heard beep, 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 and I'm like, what's that? She said, oh, it's time for Milosha's medicine. So there are ones out there, and I know of adults that also do it, but I don't know what they are.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Ron, do you know of any in particular?
We're looking at like cell phone technology.
Exactly.
Smartphone.
Yeah.
But I think God's great creation of mothers is probably the best technology going.
Anybody else? I know. So just to wrap up, the ball is in your court. It really is. And, Sue. Okay, I'll just finish here. So this is a quote from the NIH, just so we all remember where we are. Groundbreaking scientific advances in the present and the past were possible only because of the participation of volunteers. And that is a literally true statement, not just kind of some platitude. So please, please consider participating. Thank you very much.
I just want to say something quickly. First, thank you to Mark and Kate for this amazing presentation. And I just want to, and I know Mark said this, but I want to repeat this now that we've seen all the things that are possibilities for us and our boys, for our boys and young men. Many of us in the room, some of us have been with the foundation since the beginning in 2000. And we all have worked hard at creating it, and Kate, my dear friend, will be unhappy with me for saying this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Kate is the one who has created all of this. She's the one from the beginning that knew we had to have a scientific and medical advisory board, and she got to work right away putting it together, thoughtfully, carefully, which is no surprise if you know Kate. I think about the Hamilton musical and the song "The Room Where It Happens." I want everybody in here to know that Kate created the room where this has happened. She's the reason that we're having this session. So